live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aforza Vertical AI podcast series. This is episode 1, and I'm ever so excited to be kicking off today with Brett Queener on the vertical AI opportunity. Now, before I introduce Brett, let's just set the scene for the podcast episode and really what this episode is all about today and really how it ties into the series. So over the past 20 years, we've seen huge shifts in enterprise software from the early days of on-premise to cloud, desktop to mobile, insights to AI. But the question and the fundamental question for today's podcast is how much of the user experience has really changed over the years? We're still searching for records, we're still drilling down to get details, typing in updates into the keyboards. And are the users any more productive in the way they work? Now, vertical AI is set to change everything with the way that we engage with the software, touchless operations, and really set to drive extreme levels of productivity. So in this episode, we're going to dive into the why, the what, and the how of vertical AI, and how it really is set to change the software landscape forever. So with that, it's an absolute privilege to introduce Brett Queener. Welcome, Brett. It's great to have you on the podcast with us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Glad to be here. On the first one, I am honored.
The first one, and a long way to go because there's a lot to talk about. But really, this episode today is all about setting the opportunity. And I guess it was really spurred off of a conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, talking about not just where vertical AI is going, but where we've come from an enterprise software industry. And I think having yourself spent the last 20 years, more than that in the industry, seen everything across Siebel Systems and Salesforce, I think the question is how much of that user experience has really changed?
Sure. So I just did the math. I've been working in and around enterprise business software for 33 years.
Wow.
And you guys can check out my bio on LinkedIn. What I do now is I'm an investor at Bonfire Ventures, a leading seed stage firm. And we invest in companies with about 5 to 10 people with sort of $500,000 to $1 million revenue with product and market. So if you will, giving back and trying to figure out and identify and support the next generation of great software leaders. And what is interesting, and the tease is, I've been in software for 33 years. I've never been more sort of nervous, excited. I'm almost like a little schoolboy, first day of school, and we'll get to it, because I think with AI, especially vertical AI, so much changes, and it's kind of fun for someone who has the historical context that I do to sort of identify that change and see if I can, guide others to sort of pursue it appropriately. I started my career pre-client server days. I was the Jimmy Neutron at this company that helped bring in client server computing.
Yep.
I remember the amount of money that I would spend for a Windows 386 with for the dorks in the room, they know what I'm talking about. That's the hertz on the Pentium chip on the Dell desktop I was using.
What sort of memory was on something like that, do you think, back
Oh my God. You want to go way back? I remember I used to mow lawns in the 80s to make $400. And with $400, I could buy 16 kilobytes of memory. Do you remember back then? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So, oh God, back then the memory on that thing was probably 2 or 4 megabytes. I can't even remember. And then after business school, I joined Siebel Systems, which was, and you spent some time in the Siebel environment, and the CG crew know that. Well, one of the first products that Siebel had was in the CG cloud. I remember one of our early customers was BAT, British American Tobacco. And the interesting thing with Siebel, and like all applications, the user interfaces were interesting, right? If you think about the user interfaces, they were essentially graphical views into the underlying schema in your database, right?
Yep.
And there are a bunch of tabs that represented different canonical tables. accounts, contacts, visits, etc. And then, there were list views within the tabs, and then there were, and you could save list views, and then there were fields, etc. And, essentially you would do a CRUD action. As a user, you would go in there, and CRUD means I'd either create a record,
Yep.
I would read a record, I'd update a record, or I'd delete a record. And if you think about that user interface, if you really dig into it, not really that easy to use, because the human, the cognitive layer, I want to go do something. I want to look up the last 3 orders that I sent to this shop, or I'd like to recommend a promo to this shop that everyone else seems to recommend people are accepting. Well, you have to translate that in your head to how the product worked and sort of hunt and peck across the application. Right? That's how it was. But that was accepted. The big issue in those days was, if you remember, and you were on the implementation side, Andy, we used to ship this product on CDs. And you would spend 10x to implement the software. Another 3 to 5x. Remember, you had to buy your own laptops. You had to bring your own databases. Forget integrating it to stuff, God forbid. And then they would customize it. It would take a year. So you bought it, took a year to deploy. And then you'd roll it out, and it was hard to deploy. And then Siebel would say, hey, I got a new version of the software. And you'd be like, oh, can I just install it? Oh, no. You take this CD, and you need to repay Anderson's, half what you paid before, to reinstall the changes they just installed. So not really the best model. And then some of us joined the cloud. In fact, I went to Salesforce.com very early, sub-employee 100. And, remember, and Salesforce wasn't even called the cloud then. It was called on-demand. We called it no software, which is kind of a clever turn of phrase because, of course, it's software. But the deployment model was beautiful. Right? One, you could leverage a shared utility or service as opposed to you spending all this money yourself and building your own power plants and the rest of it, using the apartment shared utility service. And if you had a laptop or a desktop, if you had internet access, you could just log into the service, which was great. You could pay as you go. This was before the days of annual upfront, but you could choose to end that contract when you wanted. And it was relatively easy to configure and deploy in a metadata customization layer. So every time there was an upgrade, it never broke, and it kept all your own customizations. But if you look at Salesforce's user interface today, looks like a modern version of Siebel. There's list views and tab views and app pickers and fields and form views and dashboards and the rest of it. So as a user, you still have to hunt and peck. Now, I would argue that the cloud actually made it worse for end users. Of course, a non-technical person can change the layout of a page. Of course, they can create a dashboard. Of course, they can create new fields. And with the expansion of Force.com, you can create new objects, new apps, etc. So that was great for them, but for end users, oh my God, super easy to customize every day. New fields, new tabs, new shit to fill out. Yay. No. Second, do you remember how hard this stuff was to integrate back in the day?
Yep.
Remember at Siebel, we ran a partner certification program, but God forbid. We came up with REST APIs. Oh, the people decided to be API first in their data models. And now it's much easier to integrate Salesforce and other products to other products. So now, great. My manager decides, oh, for this process in sales or in product or the rest of it, there's 5 or 6 other products that solve these certain best-of-breed use cases that I want to operationalize perfectly in my org. And so now, instead of using one app, I'm using 9.
Yep.
So in my head, often when I'm cognitively trying to think about doing something, I'm hunting and pecking, not across just one application, but sometimes up to 8 to 9 applications. And rightfully so, I think people are looking at applications, what they bought, and the rest of them doing a little retrench and trying to figure out, like, how do we really drive employee productivity? Most software is just not that useful to the end user. It doesn't actually sort of talk to them, or they talk to them in their language and assist them on that cognitive layer just to get stuff done. I don't think users wake up and go, thank you, piece of software. Who created this? Let me track you down and give you a high five. Because I can't imagine doing my job without you. Software just hasn't been useful kind of until now. We finally now have the opportunity, especially in vertical AI, to leverage AI plus our metadata and our workflow and the rest of it. Just allow the software to work the way these users always wished it would.
Yeah, I think that's it. That is really, you've hit the nail on the head. And just to summarize everything you've just said there, the past, what was it, 33 years, you said, of all the changes you've seen and everything you described, it was all about making it faster to deploy, making it better to configure, making it better to report on, making it better to manage, but it wasn't about the end user.
Making it easier to deploy and the managers in the company.
Yep.
People could enter data and then the managers could see what was up to track productivity of individuals or effectiveness of a process. But in terms of the individual worker in that process, shit.
Yeah. And you're right. And I think the real emotional side of this, or the thing you can relate to, is show me a piece of enterprise software where someone wakes up in the morning and says, if you took that away, I need that. I can't do my job without it. It makes it easier. It's that kind of friction that I feel like there's a real opportunity to see that sort of paradigm shift now to software where we make the day job easier.
That's exactly it. Like today, it's an interesting one. A VC is a weird job. You talk to 1,000 vendors, 1,000 founders, and you have to find 998 reasons to politely say no, but also be helpful on the call. You're 10 minutes in, I realize it's not going to be a fit. I don't cut it off. I quickly shift to, like, how can I help this founder? 18 months ago, I'm writing notes. Okay, I'm writing notes by hand. I'm not present with the founder. Calls over. I've got these notes here. Now I could use an online night to whatever. And then I've got to go back to those notes to understand what's going on. Should I be following up? Because you don't want to be the VC that ghosts founders. And often you don't want to, but you're so busy. And then I got to meet with the team and discuss this opportunity. So then I got to take these notes, transcribe them, and copy them into somewhere. Today, I have a note taker that's incorporated. We use a CRM called Affinity. It's one for VC. It knows the individual I'm talking to because they're in my calendar invite. It auto records that. It then uploads the transcript and a summary transcription of that conversation. It also sends me a reminder email, so I have to figure out to follow up. And I'll often share it with founders so they have it. Secondly, if my partner has met with somebody before and they want me to do a follow-up, instead of me asking the same dumb questions, I'm sorry, my partner asks smart questions, but instead of me asking the same question that somebody already had, I could go through the transcript, I could quickly see the answers, and so I can have an incremental conversation with that founder. Now, everyone probably on the call is like, well, of course, dummy, that's how it works. It's not how it worked a year ago.
No.
But like,
a year ago,
I'm never not going back. I'm never not doing that.
It would seem insane. It would seem like a waste of time.
Well, let me give you another example, like a great example. Maybe I inspired you, but within a week of each other, we both delivered sort of the same asset at our companies. We write a bunch of content for our firms. We run a lot of webinars with experts on hiring, PR, et cetera, for people to attend. Founders don't attend. It's frustrating. We get a call, we're like, what are we going to do? Or they don't read our content before you do. Like, we wrote this content. Why don't you go look at it? We wrote it because the third time somebody asked us, we just go read this.
Yeah.
And we sat in this call, we're like, maybe stop writing this stuff. It spends a lot of time. What a waste of time. They're not leveraging it. Why do we do these webinars? They don't attend. Oh. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. No, we can't give up because we need them. I'm just going to create a bot, run agent, call ask Bonfire. I'm going to pour all of our content that we've ever done around its founder, and we're going to give it to them and say, go use this. And if you go and ask us a question or do something without asking it first, then shame on you. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I knew it could be done because I've been studying AI. So on Wednesday at 4, and then Thursday at 9, I looked into it. By 9:30, I had 80% of something built. It was, I used an off-shelf product called Chatbase. It's declarative. I pointed it at all the relevant documents. I learned RAG a little bit and realized pointing it at stuff that didn't speak to it, etc. And then I went to train it. You train it like it's an employee, but it doesn't have ego. Like I pointed it to a bunch of articles and somebody asked a question, it gave answers. And I was like, oh, why did it give the article? Because I didn't tell it to him. Like, hey, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. When somebody sends you this, da-da-da-da-da-da, give the link, retrain, great. And then I gave it tone. Hey, you work at Bonfire. It's like training an employee. You work at Bonfire. You are helpful. Use this tone, et cetera, et cetera. Now, some of my partners are like, we should create one just for you that's kind of snarky in response. And you did the same thing for Ask Albert, right?
Yeah, right on. So it must have been literally a day after speaking to you, we had Albert spun up in a Forza, and in a similar way, it knows all of our products, our data models, our documentation, our price lists. And I think within 24 hours, it was the most useful employee in the company in terms of everybody just asking it, using it. And again, back to the point we just spoke about, if we took Albert away, we'd have a lot of pissed people. It's become part of the fabric of the company and used by everybody. So for me, it was incredible by the results it can share, and like you said, everything from tone to understanding, but how quick it was done. I think in the same sort of way, 3 or 4 hours, and we had something that was genuinely useful and has provided something that everybody...
as old dogs in the software industry, because I have a bunch of AI-centric companies. Everyone's going to be an AI. There's no such thing as an AI company. But I have companies that were sort of AI native, focused on AI for this, and leveraging AI for these industries. And what they talk about is, when I was doing product at Salesforce for other companies, there's no miracles. This is the features we need to build. Here's the screens we need to do in what order, da-da-da-da-da-da. There was some breakthroughs at Salesforce. Craig Weissman went away at night and came back and created Apex Visual Force. Created code that could be upgraded as well. Remember that? It was like, oh, that's amazing. But these people walk away and they talk about finding minor miracles every couple of weeks. And so, like when you saw Albert or I do this stuff, you go, oh, holy cow. And it's super exciting. And you kind of go, let's go.
Yeah, no, right on. And it's, well, just on that, I think that brings us to a nice point here. So when it comes to this UX paradigm shift and this whole idea that AI can change the way that users engage with enterprise software, where are some of the kind of use cases you see in this?
Well, yeah, I think first and foremost, if we understand a little bit about the technology, and the LLMs are these giant models, right? They're pretty broad, right? And then we use something called RAG to sort of narrow them down so that for a given use case, it's not so broad. Like in the case of Albert or Ask Bonfire, if I have it look at or pointed at stuff that's not relevant to the use case I'm solving for, then you can't be as useful to the end user asking questions or wanting to do stuff. So, I would say more than half of our investments are in vertical software companies. We like vertical software companies even before the age of AI because they're very focused, right? You're not wondering like which industries are we going off? What products should I build? Which of these personas should I solve for? So if you have a team that comes with what I'll call user empathy, they have history in the space, you very quickly understand who you're selling to and what the problems are and the product that they need, right? Which allows for these customers to build much more meaningful value product and marketing and momentum. And then over time, just from a business perspective, it allows them to expand their share of spend. Because if you're selling to, in your case, CG or Viva at Pharma, if you're using other horizontal products and your vertical vendor can give you this solution that speaks the same solution, that's great. And it's interesting. And if your user in the vertical was using 2 or 3 applications and they can use one, that's great. I'll get back to that in a second. Now, when you think about AI, and I really think about next generation interfaces, the way I think about, the best way to think about, and I call it agentic interface, is put software aside for a second. Imagine your employees who have to log into software, each of them in their own role. So in your world, a driver, a promotion planner, whatever that might be. If they can hire the best assistant, forget the cost. Each of them get a dedicated assistant. Now it's a different type of assistant for drivers. What would they do? What would they do? If you could have an assistant that worked for you 24/7, what would they do for you? What questions would they answer? What jobs would they do for you? And that's what I asked software founders and customers to think about AI. And so that's the opportunity from an agentic interface, which is instead of hunting and pecking across an application, and look, you guys have done some studies and the rest of it, right? Like, what did you say? What was the example in SAP Business One? If you just wanted to do what, how long would it take?
Really simple. So I'm going along to visit a customer. I can't remember their name. I just want to look up that customer against that account, find their phone number, and pull it back using the mobile app. And as simple as it sounds, it was taking 2 minutes. Just to do that simple task was 2 minutes.
Right, which is ridiculous because all that information is in these different systems, but you're hunting and pecking across applications. What if you could just ask the application? What if you could just say, hey, what's this phone number? It says, this is the phone number.
Yeah, because to your point on lists and views, right? You've got to search, filter, sort, and then let alone want to do an update where you have to type something back in. I mean, it's a...
So that in general is the case.
Yep.
What's interesting about vertical AI, and then I think, I don't know you, but like I use text on Apple, right? And I hate it when I get a Facebook message. What is that app? It always asks me to update, or I get a WhatsApp, etc. I don't want to use 3 text messaging apps. You know what? My text is pretty good. Yep. And I ask people questions, I can get answers on it. It's my wife and I communicate. I don't have a business app. My wife's like, when are you coming over for dinner? I don't look it up. I'm 7 and she has the answer. I don't make her go into an application and go, Brett is my husband. What is his schedule? Like, give me a break. And so these users don't want to have 4 or 5 things to go ask. They want one. Now, the interesting thing about vertical is, one, there's a lot of metadata, right? Like, if you look at Forza, it's a very broad platform. It covers a lot of the underlying data. This is the advantage of these databases and schemas, et cetera, that today we make our users unpack through screens. So we cover a wide flow of questions people would ask or actions we'd like the product to do on our behalf. So that's great. 2, it's personalized. And so I talked about RAG. When you teach the agent, you could say, hey, I'm Johnny. I work for people that are drivers. This is what drivers like to do. This is what their day's like, etc. Or my name is Jimmy. I'm a trade promotions assistant. We can very much focus within that context. And so that when someone talks to them or asks them to do something, 1, they understand the context, and 2, it's much more natural. And so the analogy I like to use is, I went to a customer the other day. This was a sort of sales enablement category. It's a multi-billion-dollar category. And the sales enablement category today is, we wish salespeople would have the answers of what they need. And in some industries, they have DM or file management systems. And because, if there's a question or an answer, we store it in a file somewhere, And then we've found the knowledge, some expert writes the knowledge, and God forbid, if the user could just search it using star schema or the rest of it, they would find the doc, pull it up, and it would be great. Well, that's the industry today. It's not really what the salesperson wants. Like, if I'm a driver, like I want, hey, if I see this competitor in here, what should I do?
Yeah.
What's the promo here? Can you remind me what they coming in this thing? I can't remember. Was she super happy last time I met? Is there an opportunity for us to over please here? What was the last promotion stand I'm supposed to put in there?
Yeah. No.
I'll store that in a file or a doc because that's my buddy. And so what I tell people is, imagine you could hire $100,000 or £100,000 employee for each of your drivers that sat in their things and answered them the questions all day long. But the problem is, if you hired that person, they can be super helpful, but God, they have to understand your product, your business, et cetera. It would take 6 months to a year for them to be good. But the opportunity with agentic AI, especially within the verticals where you have this context, it's no longer true. Within a day, I can point them at your data. I can point them at your visits. I can point them at your conversations. I can point them at your dockets. And they're ready to go within a couple hours. And the other really cool thing is they have no ego.
They do what they're told.
Model them.
Yeah.
They'll be very clear. Oh, I'm not very good at this today. I couldn't answer this. Can you please feed me so I can be better? Pretty darn exciting.
It is. And just on that exciting point, I think what has traditionally made vertical software so specialist is what makes this opportunity so exciting, because I think what you touched on a lot there was the importance of understanding personas, roles, business processes, because we can only provide that useful agentic interface if we know that you're a driver and that you're different to a sales rep, or you're different to a key account manager or a trade planner. And I think the advantage that vertically focused companies have in this space to truly be valuable and useful just sets the whole space apart. And like
absolutely,
you said,
when you play with an LLM, if people have played with it, it's kind of cool. The first thing, what gets more interesting when you start to narrow, go deeper and deeper. If you're not vertical specific and role specific and contextual specific, that thing falls apart pretty quickly. And and then just like any software, when somebody wanted a new piece of feature and you roll it out and it wasn't what they wanted, you're like, oh, well, this is really promising. And you don't want to break users' hearts. With verticals, you've got the metadata, you've got the context. And I think a lot of the users, ironically, in verticals, they're not you or I. They have stuff to go do. So can we unleash them from the computer or the screen to go do what they do?
Yeah.
Right.
And Brett, that point on unleashing, and I still think, and we talked earlier, there's still huge value in the text exchange if there's that sort of helpful agentic experience. But I love this term, sort of touchless operations as well, and where things can go from the multimodal side of things into voice, photographs, video, even gestures in the future. Where do you sort of see that space going? And are there any particular areas that really excite you about where this could take the enterprise engagement experience side of things?
The way I think about it is, ironically, the interface may just be text for most things, because you just ask a question, you want an answer, or the rest of it. Now, there are roles, et cetera, like analyst or trade promotions, where I'm trying to see a large set of data. But even that, don't show me 9 dashboards that I then need to understand. And we're all, those that are dorky can look at 6 dashboards and see the trends and the correlation and the rest of it. But God forbid, just tell me what's going on. As I think about these different interfaces, one, what's the right way to interact with it? It might be voice, it might be text, it might be typing. It depends on the individual role. I think in terms of how you get to answers in a much faster way, that's where it's interesting, which I think about, what is the fastest path to automation, right? Like you guys have a really cool product, which is instead of trying to figure out and log, remember back in the days of Siebel CG and the rest of it, okay, shelf space planning, what's on the shelf? Let me look at it. What do I go do? You guys can take a picture with your phone and AI can go read that picture, bring it down, normalize it, understand what those are, and then automatically bring that pass that data appropriately. So we just can be able to get the answers that we need, right? So whether it's, photo, whether it's image creation, image automation, etc., it's great. I also think there's a really interesting opportunity on the creative side around on CPG, on ads and ad formats and understanding. I've looked at companies, interestingly, recently that are able to understand from creative people's emotional response to creative, such that people will more emotionally respond, to this Unilever ad in this position, etc. It's sort of unlimited, but for me, like, if you never even use voice, the opportunity to fundamentally change the value proposition for the end users of traditional business software application is sort of stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just as we sort of bring this episode to a close, if I could ask you two key questions, and it'd be great to hear you answer these in sequence, but it's really, what advice would you give to a software vendor in the vertical AI space about the way they think about their products and taking them to market? And then secondly, what advice would you give to a customer? And it'd be great, in the CPG space, or looking back really on how should they look to embrace vertical AI and the way they think about their teams and their users, their personas, their roles?
If it's a vertical AI company, I would say, hey, congratulations. It's a lot easier to succeed as a vertical AI than a horizontal AI company. I think the right to win now, which is really interesting. I mean, the right to play as a software vendor actually isn't your underlying technical chops. So first thing I would say is the right to play is how well do you know the jobs to be done?
That's great.
Right, you have to know the jobs to be done by role within this industry. And so we only try to invest in people that sometimes often come from industry and understand the pain point, et cetera. And then how well is that reflected in your underlying data model?
Mm-hmm.
You need to quickly think about, can you be the assistant? Who are the lead roles who play at your companies? And how quickly can you be the lead, if you will, agentic assistant for those individuals? And to do that, you need to make sure you understand what people want to do, what questions they want to go ask, or actions they want to do. And you need to make sure you've set up the right architecture such that you can train those LLMs to have context, such that this promise that I speak of can work. And quite frankly, it's not as hard as you think, because you don't need to go build out 47 new screens that no one's going to access and go through all the usability testing and the rest of it, and then do this ton of onboarding. Like, people understand, like, in CG, the rest are like, oh my God, I got to roll this out, get another version. Are they going to use it? I got to do training, multi-country rollout. I got to pay Anderson's, or now it's Anderson Consulting or Accenture, tons of money to do UAT and training. Well, if the product works the way the person wants as an assistant, the hell's onboarding? There's still some. So that's sort of what I would tell them.
Yeah.
Job one, job two, sort of job three. And I would have them think. In the old days, I would be like, oh, start with this wedge, stay focused because it's so hard to build in the rest of it. And don't spread too thin, because then you're going to do many things poorly, because you can't go build nine modules of sets and screens that work really well. If you've got a good data model and you've really figured out your users and agentic interface, it's very easy to add schema. Just adding objects. It's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the conversation and guide. And it's pretty exciting for me, because all the advice I would have given seed stage startups or early startups, I kind of have to throw out the window, because what's interesting is what I'm seeing at customers is second a user is like, oh, this stuff's amazing. Wow, this agent's helpful. But then they're like, I got to go do hunt and peck, and there's others. Hey, agent, or Forza, or can you just do this for me? Because I don't want the others. And so what's interesting, customers are going, hey, like, it's the same user. Can we not use this stuff from the other vendors so that we can make this individual as productive across all that they need to do with what they're with you? And you're like, yeah, and I could probably do that in 4 weeks. So it's very interesting in thinking. So, but from an end customer perspective, what's really exciting is I think I can demand a ton more innovation, and a ton more usability at a much faster point in time. That's one. The second thing is I've talked about assistants, and in my mind are co-pilots or assistants, which is my language for using what are software. Software should be an assistant. Now, there are parts of the job where we shouldn't have humans do it at all. And it just should be what we used to call automation. And so interestingly, there are digital workers that are emerging, right? Which is there's a set of tasks or et cetera that can just be automated away. So each create a digital worker and they do this all day. And you asked, the second question was a sort of long-winded answer, which is, look, I think for the CG industry, I think there's, whether it's cloud or, I mean, look, Forza's got the best damn solution in the industry by far, but whether it was on-premise or cloud or the rest of it, whatever software have not been easy deployments. I've got multinational deployments. I've got people in the trucks. The phone doesn't have internet access somewhere. Got lots of data, et cetera, et cetera. And I think to some extent, they're like, okay, yeah, is this just another piece of software? And I think vertical AI is the first opportunity for them to really think about, I was buying this software to really drive productivity, really make my end users so much more productive. And right, we've seen there's news, right? Like saw the news on Unilever and others, where they're really trying to think about the proper costs, right? With inflation and humans getting more expensive, et cetera. And I think this is finally now the opportunity to really dig into this vertical AI opportunity to really drive amazing efficiency at your organization. You don't need the same number of employees. And the employees you do have, their jobs have become so much more elevated. Just imagine how many more visits outside of like, how many more amazing visits one driver can do in a day than they could before from an AI perspective. And you should be looking at it from a first principles perspective. And that's what I would ask all the customers in the space to really dig into.
Fantastic. Well, Brett, that was a fantastic summary and a fantastic close. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will have too. You heard it here first. The vertical AI opportunity is going to be game changing for productivity. It's going to change the way that we engage and we interact with enterprise software. And this is just the first in the series. We're going to be digging into lots of other areas, but it wouldn't have been the same without kicking this off with you today, Brett. So really appreciate your time, and thank you again.
Absolutely. I appreciate you putting up with my emotional soliloquies, but as you can tell, I'm super excited. And even myself, I'm trying to figure out the right set of concise words to sort of capture what this opportunity is.